Well, welcome back to the Never Board of Trade podcast.
We are back.
We're
I like
here.
the name. Yeah.
I'm liking it. It's grown on me, and as I've been saying it to other people and been sharing it with people, the feedback's been fantastic. So
Yeah.
I think corny puns always a win is what I'm hearing.
There you go. There you go.
All right. So since we last got together, I think we left off the last podcast letting people know that in between we were going to have the recording of our federal candidate debates across all the ridings of Brampton.
Yes.
That happened.
That happened.
A thing happened.
It took 5 years out of my life, but it happened. Yeah.
And somehow you have no more gray hair. I'm very envious. So you really took the lead on behalf of the Board of Trade to put all this together. So thank you on behalf of all of us.
Yeah.
You really took the ownership over this. So I'd love you to maybe talk a little bit about what do you think happened? I think I'm still trying to put together that 12-hour marathon day we had yesterday.
Yeah, it was nuts.
So
nuts.
I'd love to hear your perspective.
Yeah. So for those listening, this was our first collaboration with Y Media.
Yeah.
And Y Media is a fantastic organization. And, we talk a lot about the media desert in our region, specifically in Brampton. And Y Media is one of the few, I would say, they started in 2016, right?
That's correct. Actually, longer than that.
Okay,
I think 2016 for the channel. I know Yudhvir's been at, I think, 2008, 2009.
Oh, wow.
He's been at it for a while, yeah.
Oh, wow.
He's OG.
Yeah. And he's built something that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, 24-hour news channel.
Yeah.
They cover a wide breadth of things from politics to entertainment.
Yeah.
They obviously have coverage in Hindi, Punjabi, Urdu, but they also have a significant amount of English coverage.
A full-time English channel.
Yeah.
They have that much demand.
It's incredible. Yeah. And also Yudhvir says this a lot, but they have the only free English newspaper, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that.
And the part that was impressive to me was I had a sense of what their scope was and their distribution and so forth. What I hadn't gotten a great handle on, and shame on me, it's not a criticism of them, it's my own ignorance. Yeah. I had not realized to the extent to which they had a true commitment to the idea of journalism. That they have and I use this word carefully because I don't want to suggest that I thought less of them.
Yeah.
But journalistic integrity, not just integrity as people, but journalistic integrity. There has to be a story here. We have to tell it the right way.
Yeah.
We have to be neutral. We have to be thorough.
And we have to invite every party to these debates.
Yeah.
And that's something that I noticed with Yudhvir, and I'll explain sort of for the audience what we did. But watching Yudhvir interview these candidates and provide commentary, very sharp commentary, and I really respected his craft. I really respect his craft, and he has this this subtle kind of brilliance in his way of interviewing. He remembers exactly what the candidates say.
He's got a killer memory.
Yeah, great memory, and he's very quick with the follow up.
Yeah.
And I'll explain sort of a moment that I thought was really, really powerful. But we collaborated with Y Media to put these debates on. I worked with their team to invite all the candidates in all of the 6 Brampton ridings in this federal election.
It's crazy to think there's 6 now.
Yeah.
And population-wise, you could actually justify a 7th, which is bananas to think about.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, we have your riding is new, so Brampton Shinkuzi Park.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's, of course, Brampton North Caledon now. So Brampton North has become Brampton North Caledon.
Yeah.
The south side of Caledon is now in that riding. And there's been some redrawing of boundaries. Yeah. I used to be in Brampton South. Yeah. I'm now in Brampton Center. So, it's a bit different. And so anyway, we now have 6 ridings. Yeah. And, I'll just say there's been some challenge in getting all of the candidates to participate.
It's a very nice way to put it.
Yeah. I mean, we reached out to everybody, sent an invite to everybody. First of all, we had to wait till May 9th to get a full list of candidates on Elections Canada.
Yeah, and some major parties didn't even have their, that's not just like the odd independent or the individual here or there. We're talking of the big 3 did not have candidates in place until literally the last day. Yeah. And some of those individuals don't really have committee presence. They were on paper candidates.
No, exactly. They were paper candidates. Yeah. I'm not shy about saying that. And there wasn't even contact information on Elections Canada. Yeah. I mean, and as an aside, I think that's one of my observations from the day.
Yeah.
We didn't have great representation from all the parties, and I worry about the quality of candidate that's being run in this election?
Before we get into
Yeah.
the debate, so I'd love to talk a little bit more. So we haven't
Yeah.
talked about this piece. So what do you think that means that
Yeah.
we didn't? And so the NDP, so I said one of the three majors, the
Yeah.
NDP did not have their candidates ready
Yeah.
before the 9th of May, and many of those
9th of
individuals
April,
are
yeah.
not really
Yeah.
parts of the community.
Yeah.
The news came out this morning that the news conglomerate has dropped the Green Party
Yeah.
from the official federal leaders debates because they did not run enough candidates in enough ridings across
Yeah.
Canada. Traditionally,
Yeah.
the Green Party has managed to do so.
Yeah.
So what do we think it means that so this is not a one-off in Brampton. This
No.
is a trend that's much larger.
Yeah.
What do we think it means that these parties aren't able to find candidates? Is that because this election came about somewhat as a surprise?
Yeah.
Although I don't think it was really a
No,
surprise to
yeah.
anybody. Does it mean that there's something bigger about how people feel about this election, or what difference it would make? Like, is it that the parties don't care, or is it that the candidates themselves are not stepping forward because how they feel about their capacity to win under some of these different banners?
You know, I did a little bit of work
Yeah.
on this in my career, and I do think there is an increasing challenge in attracting people to run and participate in
Yeah.
the democratic process.
Yeah.
And that includes attracting candidates. And I think the outreach has been challenging throughout the years. I think, you know, we unfortunately, I also think we're moving towards more of a presidential style
Right.
a system, and where the central party and the party leader
Yeah.
is the most important figure.
Yeah.
And you know, we've seen it with the provincial and the federal context, but you know, the party leader is the only person that does media
Sure.
and debates,
Yeah.
and the local candidates, they almost don't matter. They're
proxies. Many of them are proxies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you're voting for X candidate in Brampton,
Yeah.
whatever, South, Center, whatever,
Yeah.
you're voting for, you know, either Pierre Poilievre or Mark Carney or Jagmeet Singh.
Which is the limitation of our system, because
Yeah.
it's worth reminding them. Like in the US, when you get to do that, you get to vote twice, right? You're voting
Yeah.
for the president
Yeah.
and you vote for your local representation.
Yes.
In Canada, our system doesn't allow that. You're
No.
voting for your local representative
Yeah.
who then forms government alongside the rest of their party.
Absolutely.
So there's a real danger into falling into this, I'm voting for prime minister, because it really comes therefore at the expense potentially of your local representation.
I completely agree. And I think as a country, we need to do a better job of conveying the importance of local representation in parliament. I mean, it just so happens that the prime minister usually holds a seat.
Yeah.
Right? It's just a convention of our system.
Yeah.
But what we're really electing is a legislator that represents
Your riding.
our riding,
Our
right?
community, yeah.
Yeah, that's what the election is. It's actually 338, or I don't know the updated number.
I think it's more now. I think it's like,
yeah.
it's in the 350s. I
Yes,
think now.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's over 300
Yeah.
elections
Yeah.
that are happening at once. It's not one election,
Yeah.
right? So yeah. Anyway, so that was my assessment there. And on the Green Party piece that you mentioned, I mean, it was abundantly clear that some parties ran candidates in ridings just so they can, you know, qualify for all of the perks that come with that, right?
And in some cases, that's always like that's always going to be a
Yeah.
part of politics,
Yeah.
unfortunately, right? There's going to be individuals who run who don't even have a shot at winning. It's like those people who pitch the business on Dragon's Den or
Yeah,
whatever. Like, I'm
yeah.
here for the exposure.
Yeah.
I'm not here to get I'm not here for the reward. The
Yeah.
reward is the opportunity to be on TV time, the opportunity
Totally.
to get covered and so forth. And that's fine. That's part of the process.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out there's a bigger meta thing here, because at the same time,
Yeah.
and I'm obviously drawing some broad generalizations here,
Mhm.
but I see the NDP in decline. Not in terms of, I'm not talking about the vote. I'm talking in terms of engagement. The Green Party decline in terms of engagement. These are parties, again, broad generalization. I think of parties of hope and optimism. They're really selling future visions. While at the same time, we're seeing the ascent of parties like the PPC,
Yeah.
which are really protest parties.
Yeah.
And I understand protest around is a very specific issue in some cases, individuals who feel like they were marginalized by the existing conservative
Yes.
movement.
Yeah.
But I do think there's something interesting to me, and I don't know if it's a one-off in this election or there's a bigger trend here of saying, hey, the parties that were really selling vision and hope and future ideas and you know, more left-leaning, both those parties are having trouble finding candidates, where those who are running on more right-wing, conservative, and right-leaning values and running on protest are the ones who are gaining some traction. And I don't know what it means. I'm just making an observation, but I thought it was interesting to me at least.
I mean, the People's Party, they're not even running candidates in all ridings.
No,
right?
I tried to check because I did want to ask the question of one of the candidates of the possibility of them forming government, and it was hard for me to find a clear answer. Mind you, I was Googling while moderating. But it felt like they only had about 200. So maybe if lucky 2/3 of ridings in Canada. So no chance of forming government. But they're seeing candidates all over the place.
And that's interesting too, because I think there is also I talk about the ways that we're not prioritizing and emphasizing local representation, but there seems to be this awareness that you don't need to form government to actually make a difference.
Sure.
We're seeing a number of independent candidates as an example, as we saw yesterday. But even the NDP, I think Jagmeet Singh has sort of changed his tune about wanting to be prime minister, and now there's a lot of emphasis around the dental care and pharmacare, right? The policy objectives that they're
looking for moral victories is what they're looking for. It feels like, right?
But I think there's something to that. I think also there are a lot of folks who are running not with any intention of being part of government or the governing caucus, let's say. They're running because they're either protesting or they're looking to just stir things up and provide a dissenting voice. And I think that's an interesting dynamic as well.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. I think both you, well, I'll give credit to you because you asked the question of a candidate in one of the debates you were moderating. And then I used that similar question for another candidate, but I took the inspiration from you to ask, if you're running as an independent or you're running for one of these smaller parties, should you get elected? What will you do to actually make an impact, knowing that you would never be on a committee, knowing that you would never be a minister? And the answer was interesting, because I think in both cases it was sort of like, just through sheer force of will, I will ensure that I have like voice in Ottawa, and I will make things happen. But to your point, they're running on different ideas and different ideals, and don't have a really clear answer of like the dog that catches the car. I don't know what I would do if I were in fact elected, and they weren't able to answer the question of how they would be effective. I don't think they thought that far. I think it's just reemphasizing what you're suggesting. The being part of the election is in and of itself the point, not necessarily winning.
Yeah, there's a certain energy around campaigning that I think is valuable, and it's not even just winning. It's just the fact that you're knocking on 2,000 doors a day, or putting up lawn signs. That's so much visibility for an individual as well. Not to be cynical, but I mean, I shouldn't say it's an easy way, but it is a way to become visible to the community, right? So anyway, so that was sort of my assessment there, around sort of the parties and the quality of candidate, let's say. In terms of the actual conversation, so we started at like 7:30 in the morning. It was an early morning, and we ended at 7:30 in the evening. But we had a couple of ridings where we only had one candidate. And that was disappointing, of course. But what we did is we pivoted the conversation to be less of a debate and more of a conversation, and we gave the sole candidate that came for that riding free reign to really kind of share their message.
40 to 45 minutes to run.
Yeah. And it was interesting. I think we did a pretty good job of asking some tougher questions, in the absence of some opposition. But yeah, I mean, we it was sad that we lost out on the debate element there, but we did have a couple of ridings where there was some more spirited debate, right?
Spirited was the word. Was the word. The part I was surprised by was, among those who where we had only the solo candidate. Two of those three instances, it was the incumbent that showed up. And so disappointing to be sure. Grateful for those who made the time. Like, so to be clear, anyone who made the time to come out, we're happy. So this is not about a disappointment in them. It's a disappointment in the rest.
Right.
But what I was surprised by is that an election that is appearing to be as closely contested as it is, it's got like prize fight sort of narrative to it. Liberals were down for the count. Then the change happens. Carney tags in, and suddenly Pierre Poilievre has no hope, and the Conservatives are down, and now they're staging their comeback. It seems as well. This is going down to the wire. I'm amazed that those individuals who were not incumbents, who are vying for office, who don't, because the incumbents, at least, not that I would want them to skip, but their track record is there.
Yeah.
And we can, even in their absence, litigate their performance and their contributions. And we tried to do so by calling out when those incumbents weren't there to ask those who were to comment on the track record and performance.
Yes.
But it surprised me that in some of the debates where the only person who showed up was the incumbent, what a lost opportunity for those who want that job, and in particular those conservative candidates
Yeah.
who so clearly want it, who it seems like their party may be back in it,
Yeah.
didn't take advantage of the opportunity to come and debate their incumbent and try to call them out on their record and score some points, particularly on a platform, as you talked about with Y Media. Amazing distribution. This was not a
exactly
come into the office and have a conversation with Vijay and Jaipaul.
No,
this was something much bigger.
Yeah,
and I think they really blew
viewers,
it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it is disappointing because this is not a foregone conclusion for either party. I think, and this kind of ties back into the presidential style of politics that we're in. I mean, it's interesting because it is a change election, and both parties are offering change.
Yeah,
and it's interesting because I think this is an opportunity to highlight, at least from the conservative perspective, that only Mark Carney is different about the Liberal Party.
Yeah.
The entire caucus is the same.
Yeah.
The cabinet is pretty much the same too.
Yeah.
So I think that was a missed opportunity and unfortunate. And but I also I think it was an opportunity for some of the other parties and independent candidates to have the platform to share their ideas. And I thought that was very interesting as well because I think, again, in the moderating of these conversations, a lot of these issues that we hear about and talk to our members about, the issues that show up in our business confidence index survey, we got to ask folks about
questions.
These issues.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah. And in particular, I think, for me, we talked about the important issues. I talked about housing. We got some interesting insights there around on what to do. I think the topic that was most interesting to me was immigration.
For sure, and I think we got absolutely, and it's a big issue in our community. And when we talk about the big issues that matter the most, I think we referred on the last podcast, right? It's affordable housing and immigration. I think those two things are obviously they have ways in which they're tied together.
Yeah.
But these are the issues I think that drive everything else.
For sure.
What did you make of the fact? So coming back to Yudhvir, who was a great co-host with us, and I think did an amazing job with his questions. Really tried to drive this one particular question with the candidates, and that was around the issue of immigration, particularly about some of those parties who have a platform built around the notion that a reduction in immigration is necessary, and are really trying to pin some of the challenges we're having societally, particularly around crime, safety, and matters of that, those types of matters, to the way the Liberal government has really dropped the ball on immigration. That has nothing. I'm not even editorializing for election purposes. I think it's fair to say the previous Liberal government that we've had, through their performance, particularly in the last year, has shown that they don't have a clear vision for immigration. Now, is that immigration policy leading to these other elements and challenges in society? I'll let others debate that piece. I think it's fair to say immigration reform is necessary. Mm-hmm. So, really did this great job, I thought, with his question of really trying to hold candidates to account and say, what's the number? When you say reduction in immigrants, you mean zero? I think he went, I think he literally had a 0 immigrants, 100,000 immigrants, 200,000. Like he had a whole scale that he brought them out. And one of the things I thought was really interesting was the general reluctance of candidates to speak to a number. Yeah. And from those who were speaking more independently or for smaller parties, they really sort of said, look, I don't have that research yet. For those who are from bigger parties, larger parties really use the, our Minister of Immigration will get back to us on that. Our staffers will have to do some analysis. But everyone tried to punt that number back. But people were really comfortable being outspoken on the idea that immigration is the root. And immigration policy by the Liberal government is the root of a lot of the challenges in our community. Immigration reform is absolutely necessary, but they would not speak to what level of immigration this country needed. What did you think of that?
It's fascinating, honestly. And this was a really brilliant question from Yudhvir. I think
he really put them on the back foot. It was a really smart question.
Yeah, it was because, again, as you said, I think it's such an easy populist talking point to blame so much of our issues on the other. The constituency that nobody represents in this country. But to your point, we talk about we need fewer immigrants, whatever. We need to make sure we're attracting the right kind of immigrant, which is interesting. But when you ask the question, like when Yudhvir asked, okay, what's that number? Yeah. the fact that they don't have a number or even a ballpark or can't even provide a percentage decrease or increase, I think is very telling.
Yeah.
And you should honestly, if you're going to be speaking with that level of rhetoric, you should have some idea of what you're proposing from a policy perspective. There's no policy attached to this sentiment that folks are kind of communicating. And I think, in particular, I would encourage folks to watch the Brampton East debate, because I think there was a good sort of 10-minute back and forth between you and Yudhvir and the candidate as well around the specific proposal for immigration, because I think it's a complicated problem. To your point, you brought it up in that riding conversation as well, that it's not just like a immigration conversation. It's also an upskilling conversation. It's also an issue of, well, a newcomer might enter this community with a certain level of skill sets, with a skill set that they got from the home country, but they're not able to practice in this country. And what are we doing from a policy perspective to address that problem? Because there are labor shortages across a number of sectors.
Oh, it's incredibly frustrating on a few levels. Like, because what you're really so this is like a personal editorializing piece on top of all this. So everything you say is 100% true. And if you're going to run as a candidate, do your homework. Yes. And if you're gonna lob a grenade at somebody, like, have the justification, have the numbers ready. Even if the numbers are high level, even if the numbers are still need to be refined, even the numbers need to be validated, have some justification behind the argument that you're making. To your point, speak in percentages if you need to.
Yes.
But the reason that folks don't want to go there is because it flies contrary to the narrative that they want to have around immigration, and that is they want to tie immigration to crime.
Yes.
And they want to tie immigration to car thefts and shootings and sex trafficking. And again, this othering of immigrants. And anything that's wrong in our society that you don't like, this fear-mongering piece of like, lock your doors at night because the immigrants will get you. And no one wants to talk about, oh no, if you want a job, or first off, you need someone to work in your business, you might probably gonna have to hire a newcomer. Who's gonna create the jobs in our community? Probably a newcomer. Where is skilled work gonna come from? Probably a newcomer. And this is not me editorializing my opinion. These are the facts. If we look at the economic forecasts, not just in our community, like I know Brampton is obviously everything that happens immigration-wise is amplified here, but nationally, we see the growth of our economy, the growth of new job starts, the growth of new companies all come from newcomers, not exclusively, but predominantly.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to suggest that we need to stop individuals coming to our country and not being able to have a conversation around how do we have to accept some, and how do we set them up for success is really frustrating. And then the personal editorializing part of it for me was most of the individuals on those panels who had this rhetoric identified as newcomers. And so there's this piece of me on a personal level. It's like, you're an immigrant.
Yes.
I'm the child of immigrants. Like, do you understand how offensive this is to me to hear you talk about this idea that, well, therefore I'm one of the good ones. I'm one of the hardworking ones. Like, again, just feeding into this rhetoric of there's different types of people that we should be letting into the country, but it's based around their character. And somehow we get to be the adjudicators of what is good character is 100%. A really, really thin ice place to go, I think, as a political party, and definitely as a candidate.
I agree. I mean, from a personal perspective, it's one of those things, especially when we talk about skilled versus unskilled and general labor. I mean, my parents didn't go to university, and they came to this country and worked general labor jobs, so to speak. But the environment and circumstances were different. Housing wasn't as expensive as it is today, right? Cost of living, right? There were jobs and opportunities to upskill and reskill, right? So this sort of all the sort of wraparound sort of infrastructure, right, allows immigrant, non-immigrant to thrive or succeed, right?
It is this bigger conversation, and it's probably one I'd love to have later. And I think it merits its own conversation. And I probably need to do more homework here. But there's this piece that bothers me, is that we have this expectation that if you come to this country, it feels now, because I agree with everything you're saying. My parents came similarly, that you have to be perfect. You have to be a finished product, ready to contribute at this moment. And you must be a net benefit to the economy on day one. And we as a country don't have an accountability to helping you succeed. Because if ultimately we don't look at immigrants as investments.
Exactly.
We look at immigrants as commodities, therefore,
Exactly.
is where I
Exactly.
fear we're going.
Yeah.
Who do we bring into this country and is prepared to do X? And that X means a dollar figure.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have to invest anything into that individual to help them realize their full potential, and over time, absolutely, we want to see that contribution.
Yeah.
But recognize that may also have to come alongside creating opportunities, creating environments in where their skills can be applied, having jobs available to them, investing in education, whatever that may be, healthcare, other pieces, family reunification may need to be part of it.
Totally.
But if we're not prepared to understand that we're accepting these individuals as people and have to invest in them in order for them to also contribute back to Canadian society, I think we're setting up this weird transactional relationship with immigration that is not going to serve us well in the years to come.
Yeah. Totally. And actually, Nando at State of the Region talked about sort of this piece. Well, I think it was sort of two variables that were directly correlated with the I don't know, prosperity, wealth of nations. It's education, and Canada is a very highly educated country, but the number one piece was immigration.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, Mark Carney says he wants to make Canada the fastest growing economy in the G7. Yeah. You're not going to get there without immigration.
Yeah.
And then just returning to this other piece as well, around some of the candidates, kind of relying on this rhetoric. It is not convenient to attach yourself to a number.
Yeah.
Because I realized through the conversations yesterday, there is no number that is right, or it's just, if we keep this nebulous, this sort of specter of immigration nebulous, it becomes a convenient talking point that we can kind of point all our problems
utilize
to.
whatever you need. And right now it's convenient to point to our problems.
Exactly.
And for some it may be useful later to point to for solutions. But either way, you're right. If you keep it vague, then it kind of becomes whatever you need it to be.
Absolutely.
Any other observations around policies or specific questions, or how candidates responded to stuff that jumped out to you?
I actually wanted to ask your perspective on this. This LRT pledge that we talked about. We actually did it. We followed through on it.
As promised in the last podcast. It was like there's continuity. You got to listen to the podcast now.
Exactly. I love that we did that, and we emailed this pledge to a number of all the candidates that we were engaging yesterday. And the content of that pledge was essentially saying, March 21st, the government came to the city of Brampton and announced their intentions to conditionally support the LRT tunnel project into downtown Brampton. We were asking all candidates, including Liberals, even though the Liberal Party technically,
was the pledge. Sure.
But we want to ensure that whoever forms government will see this project through. Will ensure that the project is fully funded, not necessarily providing all the funds, but working with the province and other levels, right? And ensure that the project proceeds without delay, and honestly supports additional public transit investments in Brampton, because Brampton, I think, deserves public transit investments. And all of the candidates, you can correct me if I'm wrong, all the candidates signed that pledge.
They at least committed to. Some physically signed. Some actually presented ahead of time. I think, if I recall, one actually signed on air. I believe. But they all committed to it.
They all
committed to it.
Which is great. And
you laid the trap well.
I suppose. But I think that was really smart. And I wanted your perspective on this. How do you think that worked? And was that the issue to put this pledge together?
I think it's a great question. So I was thinking about this during the debates yesterday. I'm so glad we did that. I'm so glad that we followed through on the idea. And so good on you, because you're the one who actually wrote it and got it out to everyone on time. So thank you. I like that we had a form of commitment from the candidates, because I think accountability is a big part of what debates are about. And it's hard to recall down the road. You said, Yudhvir's amazing memory aside, who's going to recall the specific statement one made a year from now on a debate? But to have some kind of artifact from that debate where we asked a specific question with a clear answer, yes, no, and we got a signature on that, I think that gives us something that we can work with going forward. We know the advocacy on this particular issue is not done. So for a whole bunch of reasons, I like that we did that. But to answer the second half of your question, I wish we had done it around housing affordability. I really
Okay.
feel like in hearing how people respond, that was a question we asked consistently to people through the debates. And I understand. I don't think we made a mistake by asking about transit, because the continuity piece
Yes.
was so critical.
Yeah.
But what occurred to me in listening to the debates yesterday was, we understand that voters aren't always clear on what level of government does what,
Yeah.
and how much power a particular a level of government has to push through an initiative on any particular thing. And I get that it's complicated. We have three, some cases four levels of government if we have regional government in place. It surprised me yesterday how many of the candidates were unclear.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you get the silly
man.
things like, I'm going to fix the potholes,
Yeah.
on Highway 10. Like, great.
Yeah.
Tell me how that's going to happen. And that's fine. Some of that stuff is not material. It's just you just sort of you have a little laugh at it. But that bigger issue of housing affordability, I think we all agreed. Every candidate understood and agreed that was an issue that needed real work and needed real leadership from all levels of government, but particularly that the federal government had real power. But but housing is not a thing that the federal government directly controls.
No.
It's something that has to work through multiple levels of government, and requires real collaboration with industry and other partners. And various candidates talk to things they would do, whether it be DC charges, or I'll push the cities to do X, or I'll make the provinces do Y. I would have loved to, because that's such a vaguer issue of high importance, I would have loved to figure out how could we have held some kind of accountability mechanism around that.
Yeah.
If you're elected, will you actually do this? Or is this going to be the issue that you're like, that we fear is like, yeah, I'd love to, but it's really the province's responsibility. It's really the city's issue. My fear is that issue is like something that those candidates would have had a lot of passion for at the debate, but the minute they're elected, they would have said, yeah, outside of my jurisdiction, so sorry, can't do anything here. And I thought that might have been an interesting issue on which to have really gotten some level of accountability, to show leadership on working with the other levels of government to create something. And in my mind, the language that I keep coming back to is in the way we think about healthcare, like a housing accord, some real legislative piece that says these are the responsibilities of the various levels of government to support meeting housing targets nationally. And again, I don't think we made a mistake. But if you ask the question of, could we have done something different? I wish we'd done something around housing.
That's very interesting, and I see your point as you explain it. I think because what I find interesting about housing, to your point, this is such a jurisdictional problem, but it's also it's one of those things that we really have to push the provinces on. And I think and actually a candidate articulated it this way, but they said, understanding that housing is largely a municipal, but that's essentially a provincial issue. The federal government acts as a advocate, and I thought that was really interesting phrasing, because that's exactly what they are when it comes to housing. We see the differences in approaches between all the parties. Some parties, in particular the Conservatives, very much view this as a carrot and sticks sort of situation, where maybe more sticks than carrots, but using carrots as sticks as well, because there's an acknowledgement that municipalities are cash strapped, they need money, and hey, we'll give you money if you do X, Y, Z with permitting and DCs and da-da-da-da-da. But if you don't, well, you're not going to get that money. And so that's one approach, right, where you're kind of using the power of the purse to influence policy change. Then there's the other approach that is more in line with the Liberal policy agenda, which is, I mean, they're also doing some of this incentive stuff.
They've tied like things like transit funding to housing, for instance.
Exactly. But they're also proposing a government body whose sole responsibility is to build 500,000 homes a year. And that also, a lot of that will be social housing, deeply affordable housing, co-op housing, all of that. So that's another approach. So from my perspective, I wonder, to what extent, like, what are the specific policies that we can realistically ask the federal government to sign on to? And maybe it is the incentives piece, maybe because that seems to have sort of there seems to be some consensus there. But an interesting idea, something to consider.
I think so, yeah. And I don't know what the answer is. Again,
Yeah.
it takes a lot more thinking. I'm just sort of responding to your question in the moment.
Totally.
I do think, as we move forward, we've already identified affordability and housing specifically as affordability as like a high advocacy and topic for us.
Totally.
The more I think about it, the more I reflect upon it. The proof point yesterday that there's like, again, lack of consensus on the approach to solve the problem, but the complete consensus on the criticality of solving that problem.
Yes.
I think it just reinforces all the time. We need to be thinking more proactively about this issue and where we can create levels of accountability
100%.
to local leadership on resolving this issue. And so yesterday was because of the federal election. I think this is something, quite frankly, that you and I need to strategize about with our members and others, around the provincial piece and the municipal piece as well. We really have to push this harder.
I completely agree. And as we look at next year's municipal elections, totally, absolutely something to look into. I also want to acknowledge that the thinking around housing, because I've been sort of in that ecosystem for a long time, and I think the way we think about the housing crisis has evolved over the years, over the past decade.
Yeah.
In 2015, this was not a supply side issue. I mean, the housing advocates, they would talk about the need for inclusionary zoning and all of that, but for all intents and purposes, it was the focus was on the flippers, right?
Yeah.
And I had a conversation with Adam Vaughan, and he really grilled the Prime Minister at the time, Justin Trudeau, on why there is no federal housing plan.
Yeah, strategy.
Yeah. And the answer at the time was it's just not our jurisdiction, right? And but fast forward, there's all of this thinking around DCs and zoning and all of that. So the thinking evolves, and I think it's institutions like ours that sort of advance those ideas. So
yeah, absolutely. So I think there's opportunity there for sure. I think we can do something on that one.
Yeah, for sure.
Any other issues or perspectives that jumped out to you?
What about you? What do you think? Yeah.
I thought it was interesting, that the again, I think we touched on some of the big ones, so the number of independents and smaller parties that ran, the overall engagement. I thought it was really interesting that this was primarily the conservative playbook, really trying to draw a line on the Trump issue and the tariff issue. And the term that they'd used time and again, was that, the issues that are facing our community did not start 3 months ago.
Yeah.
Or in our community, our country.
We've heard that a few times. Yeah, that was definitely in the speaking
that
notes.
Was clearly, yeah. I'm not giving credit to a candidate because they all said the exact same way. Yeah. So that clearly came from central office. Yeah. But I thought that was an interesting distinction. So you really got an insight as to how they're trying to manage this issue right now. When to your point, if you think about it in presidential terms, this issue is really boiling down to Poilievre versus Carney around the issue of who's going to be able to best deal with President Trump. This is the conservatives. We've now seen what it is that their attack is going to be, which is to say, sure, but all the stuff that needs fixing, this all happened before Trump. So I thought, I don't know if that was insightful so much. It was just interesting. Okay, now I understand what we can expect potentially at the federal leaders debate later this week. Is I think we got an insight into what their messaging is.
Absolutely, and this is interesting. You bring this up because this is another point of, frankly, confusion that I perceived among the candidates. There was sort of speaking on both sides of their mouth on the issue of we need to prioritize restoring our trade relationship with the U.S.
Yeah.
This is the number one priority. But we should also look into other trading partners, and we should also, interprovincial trade and da-da-da-da. And I mean, the two, you can do both, I suppose. But in some sense, there is a sort of a philosophical issue of, there are policy decisions that were made to integrate our economies.
Yeah.
The longer we stay integrated, the longer we're vulnerable to, let's say, the whims of a leader, a populist leader. So I do think I'm hoping for some more bold thinking on Thursday. We're recording this on Wednesday, so during the debate, I'm hoping to see some vision around. Okay, well, what is the future relationship with the U.S.? Is it, it's still going to be our number one trading partner, but are we going to have the same level of integration that we have with the U.S.? Or are we actually going to be ambitious about our free trade agreements with, the Europe or South America, what have you? Yeah,
and I am really curious to see how that piece plays out. And again, I sort of reiterate something that we've talked about before is, what I don't want to have is this entire election be litigated by just one issue.
Totally.
Because the affordability piece, the immigration piece, the crime and safety piece, the healthcare piece, these are all important, and I would argue over time more important. But yes, having clear vision on this particular topic is going to be integral, because a lot of these other decisions we make are going to be driven by what's economically possible in this country. So so I'm curious what insights we get there in the next couple of days, which I guess is now taking us a little bit further ahead. So yesterday happened. I think the debates are supposed to start airing like later today. Again, amazing partnership with Y Media. Not only did they produce 6 debates for us like on the spot, they're going to be distributed basically within 24 hours. Like these dudes are machines.
They are.
And it was really, really impressive. But we're not done with elections yet.
No.
So it kind of feels like we got through this milestone of like, oh, the debates are done, but the election is still like 2 weeks away. So you know, I think there's gonna be lots of opportunity for us to talk further. I think there's a likelihood we're going back to Y Media to do some stuff with them this weekend to talk about some reflections on the leadership debates that are going to be airing this week. I think we're going to do some stuff with them probably on election night to do some commentary on the outcomes of the election, which is coincidentally enough, I think when we'll be recording the next version of this podcast as well, is we'll be able to talk about, okay, so what actually happened and who are we working with. But before we wrap up today, I want to ask you something.
Okay.
So one of the things we talked about, you know, when we talked about, you know, what's unique in Brampton as a riding, we talked about the fact that this is like a riding in which it's winnable. That you know, from election to election, it can flip from being a conservative riding to a liberal riding. But one of the observations we made, at least I made, and I think you agreed with, was that pretty consistently there was consensus among the ridings themselves. So that if it went liberal, they all went liberal. If they went conservative, they all went conservative.
That's right.
It's that weird thing that comes after every debate. And we've done debates a few times here at the Board of Trade, and I've been lucky to be part of them. I always leave with this like real clear sense of, that's what's going to happen based on the candidates. But then recognizing like there's just bigger stuff that happens at a federal level and that overreads. What's your read now? Like coming out of that election, and I'm not going to ask you for a prediction on the party, although go there if you want. Do you get that sense that there's consensus? Because I was really surprised by the quality of the caliber of the candidates themselves. In some cases, I'm like, that riding has to go red because that person is amazing. That riding is going to go blue because that person was really impressive. And I'm not sure that I know, not only do I not know if we're going to be a conservative or a liberal community, I'm not even sure that we're going to have consistency among the ridings because the candidates seemed all over the place in terms of their capacity, their quality, and the level of discourse they were capable of, the ideas they were able to share. I'm curious if you've got any perspective on that. That was the one thing I left shaking my head going, I have no idea how to call this locally anymore.
No, I honestly have no idea. And I think it's tough partly because we didn't have
everybody.
We didn't have everybody, right?
Fair. Yeah.
So it's So I'm still thinking about that. I mean, if you honestly look at the polling, like 338 is showing a red sweep throughout Brampton at the moment. That could change, and also polling like is you know, you have to think about the methodology and all of that. But what I will say is the path to victory lies in the 905. I think you have to prioritize these communities, and for all the reasons you mentioned. I did talk to some of the staffers.
Okay. So great. I was going to say, let's wrap this podcast up, but that's right. You had a whole level of engagement. So, okay, let's talk about this. What were those conversations like?
So I spoke with some of the staffers that came and you know, that when I was inviting all the candidates and I asked, I said, okay, how's door knocking been? And you know, what's the vibe on the ground? And I don't even think they know. So what they said is Brampton is not a monolith, but you know, there's it doesn't matter if you're in Brampton North or Brampton South or wherever, there's sort of a similar vibe in each riding, right? But what everybody wants is they want change. But I don't know if change means, you know, they need a new party or just a new leader, because as I said, both parties are offering change.
They're both operating on that message right now.
And I think what it comes down to, honestly, is do these candidates have a relationship with the residents? I think that's what it ultimately will come down to, because I think it can go either way. And if I just use even my household as an example, you know, a smile on your face and a friendly exchange can go a long way. Because at this point, I think that the decision in Brampton will be made on April 28th. I think it's anyone's game until E-Day.
Well, and that might be the place to land this conversation, because then it makes it feel potentially like these debates might have some real meaning.
Yeah, I think
because
so.
because that's how I left it too. Like I really felt like this election at the leadership level is so close that it may really come down to, like, do I like this person better than that person?
Yeah.
And in some cases, I had really strong opinions afterward about which of those people I thought was better, just based on the conversations we had. So hopefully these debates that we did, that you put a lot of time and effort into, are actually going to have some impact. I'd love to think that we did something yesterday that will inform people on the votes they make, or inspire people to vote, and that this was all worthwhile, because it was definitely fun for me.
Absolutely.
It was fun for you. Josh, was it fun for you? Josh, give the thumbs up.
Yeah.
So it was fun for us to do.
It was fun.
I'd like to think it was actually meaningful in some way as well.
Yeah.
And then I guess as the last thing, we're not done with elections. The next podcast will be talking post-election. Yeah. But the other thing that came out yesterday too was, just to end the conversation maybe where we started, just great partnership with Y Media, and the opportunity to explore some more potential content and collaboration with them as well. Was one of the things that happened last night over dinner. And these guys are amazing hosts.
Oh my goodness.
we ate a lot yesterday.
When I walked in and there was like pronte, like I was like, this is different. This is a different day. Yeah, that was great.
But yeah, so some really cool content, I think, to come out of this too. So in a lot of ways, I think yesterday was a super successful day for us.
I think so.
And hopefully a good day for the community as well.
And also just, we had a panel of community members as well who were asking questions.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe we didn't mention that.
We didn't mention that. And I want to thank them as well for sharing their time. And, I had this moment where I realized this is important work, right? And it's we're engaging with the community, with local candidates that are trying to represent this community. And I think I'm glad that we're doing this work, and I'm glad that we have the partners that we have, and Y Media is fantastic.
And and I think, and I keep saying we're wrapping this up, but I think now that you brought up this really important thing, and I can't believe I forgot to bring it up myself, around the community panel. Yeah. I think it's worth sharing, just for those who are listening as well, like the caliber of individuals we had. So when we say community panel, it wasn't just like we're finding someone on the street to come and do this, right? The community panel, in large part, to the support of organizations like the Metamorphosis Network, to help get folks onto our panels. To the point you were making, reinforcing the importance of the work and how people look at it. These were not just folks that we found. These were the CEOs and senior leaders in some of the largest community-focused organizations in our community. Achieve, Indus, Roots Community Services, senior individuals who put real time into our community. Like, we're really blessed to have individuals like that give their time,
Frank from
their
Trios
perspective.
was great.
Trios, like business leaders, Mo from Zocam, like real business leaders as well. Who put their time into making sure these debates were handled well, put their insights into asking good questions of these candidates. To your point, people took this really, really seriously. And I hope all the more reason. I hope that we get even if we change one person or inspired one person to vote, that was worth doing. I hope we did that.
Please vote. Easter long weekend, advanced polls.
Advanced polls are open.
April 28th is E-Day. So.
Yeah, and then again, by the time we're recording the next one of these, it'll be we'll have done the OCC AGM.
Wow.
And we'll have post-election. You and I are going to spend a lot of time together over the 4 or 5 days of that weekend. But we'll have lots to talk about. What our colleagues are doing provincial-wide. Big priorities, finding out how our policy resolutions did. And talking about potentially a whole bunch of new people serving our community.
And Windsor is quite the place to be traveling to. Right?
I worked in Windsor for a bunch of years. I like Windsor. I'll take you for some good pizza.
No, absolutely. It's a border town. Let's see how it goes.
Are we allowed to go across the border? I'm not going across the border.
No, me neither.
I'm staying on my side.
No. Same here. All right.
All right. With that, we'll talk to everyone again in a couple weeks.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks for listening. All right. Take care.
Bye.